everyone. Welcome to Brothers War preview season. Today we got the official release of some of the cards from the set with the Wizards of the Coast launch video, and I want to talk about those cards today and get us into what looks to be one of the more exciting sets in recent Magic the Gathering history. But before I do that, reminder, special thanks to Caffeinated Gamer for sponsoring this video. And also, if you like this video, please like and subscribe to get similar content in the future. So let's get started. So the first thing they gave us today were the Pain Lands. So we get the rest of the Pain Lands. We get Underground River, Battlefield Forge, Lyanowar Waste, and Brushland. So now we've got all 10 Pain Lands. So this should help smooth out mana across some of the decks that have been missing pieces because white has been short with Battlefield Forge and Brushland. So I think some of those decks that wanted to use those will be helped quite a bit by that. So let's get into some new cards. All right, so the first card set we want to look at is Urza. So we've already previewed one Urza card, and I got the indication early on based on the way they were previewing things that we were probably going to see multiple versions of Urza. And we did get 2 more, so there'll be a total of 3 Urza cards, and there'll also be 3 Mishra cards that we're going to see. And they cover different points within their life. So the first one we're going to look at is Urza Power Stone Prodigy. For 2 colorless and a blue mana, you get a legendary human artificer with vigilance. You can draw a card and then discard a card for 1 mana. And then when you discard 1 or more artifact cards, create a tap Power Stone token. This ability triggers only once each turn. And Urza's 1/3, so it's a little bit harder to get him off the board. So I think what this card is designed to do is really to pump out Power Stone. So you can build your mana base to activate abilities from cards from the set. Because we move over to Urza, Prince of Krug, you see we now have Urza, towards the middle of his life. In this version, it costs 2 colors, a white and a blue mana for, again, a legendary human artificer who's 2/3. And this version of Urza, I think, is going to see a lot of play across multiple formats because artifact creatures you control get +2/+2. So putting Urza on the board immediately gives a buff to all of your artifact creatures, and already we're seeing good artifact creatures from the Brothers War, and we have a few other ones that we've seen from other sets, particularly from Kamigawa. There were a bunch of artifact card or creature cards there that had the mechanic of it where you could attach it to a different creature. So I think we're going to see a really strong artifact creature deck early on in the new standard format. But for 6 mana, you can create a token that's a copy of target artifact creature you control, except it's a 1/1 soldier creature in addition to its other types. So basically you're going to be able to copy a creature and then be able to get the advantages of that particular creature, which I think is going to be very important, again, as we move throughout the next standard season. And the 6 mana seems like a lot, but I think once we see how relevant Power Stone tokens are going to be, I think what we'll end up seeing is that we're going to see activating this ability is not all that difficult. So let's look at Mishra. And Mishra has given us 2 cards again today, in addition to the one we've seen already with the Meld. First, we get Mishra from his youth, and Mishra Excavation Prodigy, who's a legendary, again, human artificer, who's a 2/1 for 2 colorless and a red mana. This Mishra comes with haste, and you can pay 1 mana. You can discard a card and draw a card, just like you can with Urza Prodigy. So they both have that same ability to card filter for you. And on Mishra's card, you get to, when you discard a card, that 1 or more, that again, that's an artifact card, you get to add 2 mana to your mana pool, and this ability only again triggers once per turn. So basically, if you draw a card, discard a card, it costs 1 mana to do that, and then you're going to get 2 mana back. So it's, in essence, you're getting to do that for free, and on top of it, get a mana. So I think that's a pretty powerful ability that Mishra has. Mishra, Tamer of Mak'Vala. Okay, for 5 mana, 3 colors, a black and a red. Again, you get a human legendary artificer who's a 4/4. And this may be the most powerful ability so far that we've seen in the set, because permanents you control have wards, sacrifice a permanent. So to kill anything, you have to sacrifice something. And I think that is going to be a powerful ability. I think we've already seen a pretty good Rakdos deck form out there, and I think this will slot right into it to protect all of the creatures and permanents that are in that deck. And each artifact card in your graveyard has Unearth for a colorless, a black, and a red mana. So if we end up having Mishra in an artifact-focused deck, he's going to be able to bring back those cards from the graveyard and replay them for a turn, because for that ability, when you return them to the battlefield, they gain haste, and they'll exile at the end of the turn. So kind of similar to the Blitz ability that we saw from Streets of New Capenna, where you can blitz something in, it has haste that turn, and then it goes to the graveyard at the end of the turn. But in this case, when they leave the battlefield, they're going to go into exile. But I think a very exciting card for us, given where the black decks are right now. I think this may push us more into Grixis and or into more Rakdos builds of black decks. Next we have the Gix fight Yawgmoth's Praetor. So for a colorless 2 black mana, you get a legendary Phyrexian Praetor that when a creature deals combat damage to one of your permanents, its controller may pay 1. If they do, you draw a card. Or they draw a card. And I think this is really really going to be a commander card primarily, but it might have some place in standard. Gix is only a 3/3, and the discard ability for 7 total mana, you can discard X cards, exile the top X cards of target opponent's library, so your opponent's library you can look through, and you may play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. So like I said, I think this is more of a card that's really built for commander, because I think it's got a lot of application there, but we'll have to see if anybody can bring it into standard in a meaningful way. But certainly in terms of flavor from the Brothers War, it's a great card to see. Next we have Phyrexian Fleshscourger, and this is bringing in one of the new abilities, Prototype, which means you may cast the spell with, in this case, a colorless and 2 black mana, different mana cost, color, and size. It keeps its abilities and types. So Prototype basically allows you to, earlier in a game, get out a creature you don't have enough mana for. But late in the game, you might have the 7 mana to cast Phyrexian Fleshscourger, so you'll want to cast it for its full cost. But early in the game, if you don't have enough mana, you need to get something on the board, you can cast it for the Prototype cost, get it on the board as a 3/3, and go from there. Now, why is this a good card? I think this is a really good card, and I think it's gonna see a lot of play, because it's got Menace and it's got Lifelink. And for 7 mana, it has a unique ward cost, where your opponent, to target Phyrexian Fleshscourger, it has to pay life equal to its power. So that means to target Phyrexian Fleshscourger with spot removal, it costs you 7 life to do that. That is very, very, very powerful in terms of its ability to stay on the battlefield, because basically to get rid of it, you're going to have to throw creatures in front of it, because the cost to you, if the opponent has gotten out to a good start, is going to be so great that to simply try to remove it is probably going to cost you the game. So this 7/5 Phyrexian worm, I think, is going to see a lot of play. So be on the lookout for it because it's very, very powerful. Next, we've got Ashnod's Harvester and Scrapwork Cohort. So Ashnod's Harvester is a 2-mana construct, and when Ashnod Harvester attacks, exile target card from a graveyard. So ability we've seen a lot of. It doesn't, it's not Graveyard Trespasser, which you can exile a creature card and you gain a life and they lose a life. But it really is nice because it's a 2-mana card that allows you to systematically pluck cards from your opponent's graveyard, so any graveyard synergy that they're trying to use can be overcome because of Ashnod's Harvester. And it again has the Unearth ability where you can pay a black and a colorless mana to get the 3/1 construct out again with haste. So maybe on a turn you're trying to swing for victory in a game, you unearth it, it comes out, it swings, and it helps put you over the top. And then we also have Scrapwork Cohort, which is a artifact creature but also a soldier. Okay, in Dominaria United we got Valiant Veteran, who is a soldier lord, and this card is going to create 2 soldiers for you. First, you get Scrapwork Cohort for the 4 mana, who's a 3/1, but then also you get to create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token when it comes into play. So for 4 mana, you're getting 2 bodies, and I think this might be something that fits into that Valiant Veteran soldier deck that we've kind of seen developed over the last season. And again, it has Unearth just like we see with Ashnod's Harvester, but this cost is as 2 and a white mana, so it makes sense that it would be that since Valiant Veterans in white. So I think we'll see potentially 1 or 2 of these because of that ability to bring it back from the graveyard, I think is going to be important to that deck. Next, we have Titania, Voice of Gaia, and Argoth, Sanctum of Nature. This is our final set of meld cards. So let's talk about Titania first, and then we'll talk about Argoth. So Titania, Voice of Gaia, costs a colorless and 2 green mana for a legendary elemental creature with reach, and it's 3/4. So when 1 or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, you gain 2 life. So anytime you put a land into your graveyard, you're going to gain 2 life. And we already have from the Streets of New Capenna, we have all those tap lands that tap automatically and sacrifice to go search your deck for a land of one of the 3 types. So this, I think, makes a lot of sense with that ability. So where you can actually turn that into really a 3 life every time you use one of those cards. And then now let's talk about Argoth, and then we'll talk about the meld cost. So Argoth, Sanctum of Nature, is a land. It's not legendary, and that's important. So that means you can play multiple copies of it in your deck and not really have to worry about it because you can just keep playing them and putting them onto the field. So Argoth, Sanctum of Nature enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary green creature. So it's kind of pushing you towards obviously having Titania already in play when you put this in play. It taps for a green mana, and for 4 mana, 2 colorless and 2 green, you can create a 2/2 bear creature token, then mill 3 cards, activate only as a sorcery. So this ability on Argoth actually works perfectly well with Titania, because remember, you get to gain 2 life anytime you put a land card in the graveyard. And what this will do is if you mill some cards and there's a land among those, you get to gain 2 life. So there's a lot of good life gain synergy in this. Now, how do you transform it? How do you meld it? So at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 4 or more land cards in your graveyard, and you both own and control Titania, Voice of Gaia, and a land named Argoth, Sanctum of Nature, exile them, then meld them into Titania, Gaia Incarnate. And this is Gaia Incarnate. So Gaia Incarnate is a legendary elemental avatar. It has vigilance, it has reach, it has trample, and very importantly, it has haste. So when you meld it, you can immediately attack with it on that turn, and the trample makes this very, very powerful. So Titania Gaia's incarnate power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. When Titania enters the battlefield, return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So what this means is, at a minimum, you're going to get 4 lands from your graveyard, because to meld Titania and Argoth together, you had to have 4 lands in your graveyard. So you're going to get those 4 back to put into your mana base for the next turn. And for 3 colorless mana and a green, you can put 4+1 counters on target land you control. It becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste. It's still a land. So not only is Titania going to be a big creature on her own, she gets to create, like we saw with Nissa, the ability to just create for 4 mana. We get to take our lands and make them elemental creatures. And with the amount of land that potentially is going to be available to you because of Titania's abilities, you could easily activate 2 or 3 times and have those couple of extra creatures you need to finish off a game. So it'll be interesting to see where Titania ends up, but I think there will be definitely a deck that develops around her. All right, next we've got splitting the Power Stone. So this card is definitely designed to help promote the Power Stone tokens that we're going to see throughout the set. So for 3 mana, 2 colors, and a blue, you get a sorcery that says, as initial cost to cast the spell, sacrifice an artifact. It could be a Power Stone. Create 2 tap Power Stone tokens. If the sacrifice artifact was legendary, you get to draw a card. So again, this is, I think, in that vein of building more and more Power Stones to increase your mana base for being able to activate abilities or cast artifact spells. Last, we have Hurkyl, Master Wizard, and Teferi, Temporal Pilgrim. So let's talk about Hurkyl first, and then we'll finish with probably the most powerful card of the day, Teferi, Temporal Pilgrim. So Hurkyl, Master Wizard, costs a colorless and 2 blue mana, and you get a legendary creature who's a human wizard advisor. That's a 2/4, but has a very powerful draw ability attached to it. So at the beginning of your end step, if you've cast a non-creature spell this turn, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. For each card type among non-creature spells you've cast this turn, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is an amazing ability. Any kind of spells deck is going to want Hurkyl in it. Because you cast an instant on your turn, you cast a sorcery on your turn, and immediately you get, at the end step, to go and get, for no mana cost, potentially a replacement card for your hand. So if you cast an instant, you can get an instant. If you cast a sorcery, you get a sorcery. If you cast a planeswalker, and there happens to be a planeswalker in the top 5, you get a planeswalker, or any artifact card or enchantment card that you would have cast on that particular turn. I can see this as being incredibly broken in a lot of decks. I think it definitely has standard playability, commander playability. I think Pioneer players are going to look at using this. Maybe even back to Modern, we might see people wanting to use this ability in a Spells Matter deck. So I think incredibly powerful card that you can expect to see a lot of play as we move forward. Maybe now we can get back to the Jeskai deck, because Hurkyl is would be a great card for that deck. All right, so let's finish up today by talking about Teferi, Temporal Pilgrim. All right, Teferi, obviously we know from the story, is going to go back in time to the Brothers' War. So he is now a Temporal Pilgrim. So for 5 mana, 3 colorless, and 2 blue mana, you get a legendary Planeswalker Teferi that comes with 4 loyalty. Now, he also has a static ability. When you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Teferi, Temporal Pilgrim. For 0 cost, you get to draw a card. So 0 cost means for +1, you get to draw a card. For -2, you get to create a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance, and whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. I can see that becoming a real problem for people really quickly, because obviously blue has a tremendous amount of draw in it, and very quickly your 2/2 spirit is going to become a 3/3, a 4/4, a 5/5, and so on as time goes on. So the longer it's on the battlefield, the bigger and bigger it's going to get. And for -12, target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to its owner's hand. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's library. So for -12, Teferi is a board wipe for the opponent. So, and the big thing here, it's a one-sided board wipe. You don't lose anything, your opponent loses everything, except for 1 card that they get to put back in their hand. Now, I can already see how this card is going to be incredibly broken. We already have an Esper deck that's out there that loves Raffine, and that Esper deck connives an awful lot. So anytime you connive, you get to draw a card, you put a loyalty on Teferi. So getting to 12 loyalty on Teferi will not be very difficult. I mean, I've seen turns where people have used Wedding Announcement, where they've connived 9 times on a turn. It's frustrating when that happens. But imagine if you have Teferi. Now Teferi's at 13. You can then activate Teferi to whatever was left on your opponent's board will now be gone. And basically it sets you up. If you ultimate Teferi, and it's really not even an ultimate because literally you could do it multiple times. What that means is Teferi will clear your opponent's board regularly. If your opponent is playing Teferi, you're going to want to get rid of Teferi as quickly as possible. So I think spells that can immediately remove a Planeswalker, they're going to be very popular again, because if Teferi gets in play, is able to stay on the field, and you're able to draw a few cards within a few turns, Teferi's going to ultimate, and in essence becomes a board wipe, and you lose the game, because whatever that your opponent has, they're going to be able to just use those creatures to attack through and deal critical damage and lethal damage to you. So Teferi, an incredibly powerful Planeswalker card, maybe one of the most powerful ones we've seen. We talked about the Urza Planeswalker card, which is incredibly powerful as well. So I think we're going to see we've got 2 very, very powerful Planeswalkers that are going to be coming to us in the Brothers War set. But this Teferi is nuts. We've already seen a little bit of the Teferi from the Innistrad sets played, but this one's definitely going to see a lot of play. All right, that's it for today. First day of Brothers War spoilers. A bunch of awesome cards. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you leave a like and subscribe, and remember to support our sponsor, Caffeinated Gamers, I'd appreciate it. And we'll see you tomorrow for some more Brothers War spoilers.